There's a local legend that has intrigued me since childhood, and depending on who you ask, depends on the version that you will hear. But there are some consistencies that always remain. I want to look into why that might be. Is it just a tale, or perhaps this ghost story actually has some truth to it? Hello, I'm the Lady of Brassic, but you may call me Rosie, and this is my channel where I, a curious little lady, investigates the possible truths behind the mythological and the mysterious. Have your snack supplies, don't forget to like and subscribe before we dive into the White Lady of the Iron Bridge. The version of the White Lady that I heard growing up was something along the lines of a young lady had lost her infant and as a consequence took her life. Depending on who tells the story, depends on what details they will add. Some will decide that she is married, others will decide that she is unmarried, others will say she jumped, others will say she fell. There are always the three same consistencies: a young lady, a child, and a date with death. This bridge you will find located at the end of a 1 mile nature walk reserve called Ladies Walk, and this is partly the reason why people think Ladies Walk is named Ladies Walk, and it's not. The reason is because of Queen Victoria and her ladies walked the nature trail, and that's where the term comes from. But people still attribute the name to the White Lady herself, and obviously the Iron Bridge at the very end, it paints a lovely picture of a ghost story. But the interesting thing about the bridge itself is where it's located. Ladies Walk is going off onto an old Roman road, which was the main route in and out of town, and this is located in Andover, Hampshire, England. And Andover was known as a pit stop town. It attracted all types of individuals, from kings to beggars, including Henry VIII and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. And we know that Victorians were obsessed with Gothic, with ghost stories, with the medieval lore. They loved all that darkness because it was that time of religion and versus science. You know, we have texts like Frankenstein and Dracula coming out of this era. So it's not hard to kind of think, well, maybe it's just a story that Victorians came up with and we just added to it, maybe, over the time. But anyway, the images of white ladies tend to be sort of a symbol or a motif for a cautionary tale. Society was very morale focused, and you know, if we take the unmarried version, an unmarried woman has given birth, they are going to use this lady as an example to other women to not do what she did, otherwise that would be you. It's like a character profile, and we kind of need to find out who could fit that character profile, who would be the most ideal candidate if it is real. If you were to Google Andover, one of the first things that you will discover is a workhouse scandal that is one of the worst workhouse scandals in all of the workhouse scandals. So horrific that people believe it was the main inspiration for the workhouse and Oliver Twist, but people argue no because publication dates, blah blah blah. But Andover Union Workhouse had been open for 8 years at this point, and rumours had been circulating around the town that guardians, if you want to call them that, the people in charge of the workhouse, were getting drunk, abusing female residents, and exploiting them and taking the profits that the Union Workhouse was supposed to provide for the inmates, but they were pocketeering it for themselves. And you know, there were all these rumours floating around. They were being exploited so much, these people were resorted to eating bones, actual bones. Now, Andover Union House, built in 1836, it was designed to produce bone fertilizer for the surrounding farms, nutrients, good nutrients for the soil. And this is heavy machinery that these men are using to crush the bones. And we all know that a workhouse is not the best place to be, especially in terms of nutrition and food. The food you would get given would not be enough to actually sustain the tasks that you had to do, because it was very physically demanding. Home Secretary didn't believe any of these rumours. He said no, there was absolutely no way that these people are eating bones. So Commissioner goes over and he came out, it was all true, that these men were fighting like rabid dogs, is the quote, fighting like rabid dogs for these bones, just so they could survive. And it's bloody horrific, to be honest. It's a human rights scandal. After the parliamentary inquiry, all these things started coming out. And, the whole bone eating is what kind of took the front and centre. People are eating bones. This is horrific. A lot of things that were revealed were that babies who were being born were not baptised because it cost too much. And if a baby had died in the workhouse under McDougall's reign, the baby would be buried with an elder to save on the money for the coffin and burial. And if anybody asked why hasn't there been a baptism performed, the baby was then labelled as stillborn, even though the child had lived. It was just his way of trying to avoid having to pay more money for something he didn't feel necessary. But this is Victorian society, where morality is at the front and centre of society. You're being penalised for being poor, and this is where the ideology that we have today, that if you are poor it's somehow a moral failing, which is not true. The workhouses were known as prisons for the poor. That's why sometimes when you read up about workhouses, they'll be labelled as inmates rather than residents, but the doors were never locked. They could leave at any time, but why would you leave something when you've given up your home, everything you've ever owned, to go into this workhouse? Because that was the condition. You can only go into the workhouse once you've given up everything. So it's really, really horrible, and you'd be separated from your families. These were horrific places anyway. But then you had this guy doing what he was doing on top of that, and it was a massive, massive scandal. And amongst all of this, it was discovered that a woman named Hannah Joyce, who was unmarried, she had lost her child. Her baby was 5 months old and had died of what we know as SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, cot death. But the McDougalls decided that it was Hannah's fault, that she had committed infanticide, which is not the case. Medical reports show that the child did die of natural causes, SIDS, and we know historically that children did not do well in the Victorian era. It was not a clean place, and when you have babies, everything has to be sterile. Whitewashing the walls every 3 days is not going to stop that. Colin McDougall, the master of the workhouse, presents Hannah with a baby coffin, and they force Hannah to walk through the town to the church for an unceremonious burial. And the reason why they do this is because they want to humiliate her. They want the whole town to know she is this person, she's unmarried, she's, look at her, moral failure, she's from a workhouse, she's killed her child, horrible woman. But the problem here is we are left with eyewitness accounts, and there is no way to verify whether these eyewitness accounts are actually real or not, because it says some people say she was forced to walk a mile from the workhouse to the church. Others will say she was forced to walk a mile to the outskirts of town. So again, we have two versions of a story, and this is where you can see how real life events can slowly be manipulated into a ghost story, some dark fable that we tell kids. The first time I heard this story, I was a kid. We are now left to kind of decide which version we want. Okay, that's the story of the White Lady. This is Hannah Joyce. She seems like the ideal person who is the White Lady. But there's a problem. This happened, from what we know, from 1836, when the White House first opened, all the way up until the rumours were then confirmed and the parliamentary inquiry. Hannah's incident has to have happened in that 8-year frame, but the bridge itself wasn't built until 1851. If Hannah is the White Lady, the Iron Bridge was an addition at a later date. And I feel like because the Iron Bridge is a physical thing, we can walk on it, we can see it, blah blah blah, and it is quite creepy looking. It looks like a depressed Claude Monet painting, because, you know, there was so much focus on the bone-eating aspect of what was going on, terrible things, all this corruption. And you've got one woman who has been accused of infanticide. Of course her story is going to be buried underneath all of this, because why would we focus on a woman with, you know, moral failing? You wouldn't. However, I can't confirm Hannah's existence. I haven't been able to find a birth certificate, I haven't been able to find a death certificate. Do you know how many Hannah Joyces there are in the world? But that's the point, is these stories, the stories we hear, what's the truth and what isn't? And annoyingly, this case still remains unsolved. However, I'm confident that I've pretty much sussed it. The video, I hope you enjoyed, I hope it was okay, I hope I'm not too boring, and take care of yourself, like and subscribe, I hope to see you about.